When Billy the Kid's body hit the ground, he was only 21 years old. No diploma, no home, no gravestone waiting for his name. Just the echo of a shot in the dark, a breath cut in half, and the silence of New Mexico swept by the wind. He died. As he lived, wary, quick, and alone. But what turned a scrawny boy named Henry McCarty into America's most feared outlaw? That story begins long before the wanted posters. Henry was born in the turbulent heart of the 19th century, around 1859, in a smoky, brutal New York where poverty and despair shared the alleys. His mother, Catherine, was a determined Irish woman, widowed young and with few options. To survive, she moved west with Henry, chasing what many called a new life, but which for most was just dust and struggle. By 15, Henry already knew what it was to lose everything. His mother died of tuberculosis, leaving him an orphan. In Silver City, New Mexico, bounced from house to house. Nobody wanted him around. He was small, skinny, awkward, but he had sharp eyes and quick hands, and the world would soon find out. He started stealing food, then clothes. One day, a pistol. He was arrested as a teenager for robbing a laundry. He escaped through the chimney, grinning like someone with nothing left to lose. It was the beginning. Not long after, at just 17, he committed his first murder. They say it was self-defense, a fight at a ranch, a misplaced insult, a move faster than the other. The revolver fired, a man fell, and Henry crossed a line he'd never step back from. That's when he stopped being Henry McCarty and took a name that almost sounded like a taunt: Billy the Kid. The kid, the boy. But there was nothing childish in his eyes. He was light as the wind, quick as lightning, and impossible to keep locked up. Billy wasn't just any bandit. He didn't want to be. He wanted to belong to something. He found that, or thought he did, in the Lincoln County War. It was 1878. A war of interests erupted in New Mexico. On one side, powerful merchants tied to the government. On the other, small farmers and traders trying to resist. Billy joined the latter, the regulators, and fought not for money, but for loyalty. At least that's what he said. The truth is, Billy was always searching for a cause, an excuse, a mask to make his shots feel like justice. But justice and vengeance are twin sisters when you live on the edge of the law. He killed, and he killed well. His name started appearing in newspapers, barroom chatter, dusty saloons. They said he'd killed 21 men, one for each year of his life, though most historians know that number's inflated. But legends aren't built on facts. They're built on fear, and Billy was a master at that. He danced, literally. After killing, he'd drink and dance with prostitutes as if the blood hadn't dried on his boots. He had a cynical smile, a way of mocking death. He escaped prison so many times sheriffs stopped keeping count, but perhaps the most legendary was his escape from the Lincoln jail in 1881. He'd been captured after years of pursuit. He was sentenced to hang. He was handcuffed, guarded, locked, in a small room with 2 armed deputies. And yet, he killed them both, stole their weapons, and fled, strolling through the streets like he owned the town. He even stopped to admire his reflection in a shop window before vanishing. It was his last dance with freedom. By then, Billy was no longer just a man. He was a symbol, a political problem, a troublesome ghost that needed erasing. That task fell to Pat Garrett, an old acquaintance, and by some accounts, a friend. Garrett had been named sheriff, and his main goal was to capture the kid. With cold precision and patience, he tracked him, waited for the right moment. And it came on a quiet July night in Fort Sumner. Billy slipped through the back door of Pete Maxwell's house, maybe seeking shelter, maybe a hot meal, maybe just peace. What he found was the barrel of a revolver aimed at him. There was no duel, no chance. Just the sharp crack of a shot and Billy's body crumpling to the floor, alone at 21. But this isn't the story of a death. It's the story of a boy who never had a chance, of someone who sought family in wars, who chased justice with gunpowder, who became a legend because the world needed one. Billy the Kid wasn't just an outlaw. He was a mirror of his time, brutal, confused, merciless. And like every broken mirror, he reflected only what society refused to see. They say he laughed after every shot, that he left coins in the pockets of the dead, that he never killed for pleasure, only because he needed to stay alive. But legends are shaped in the dark by men with fear and sharp pens. The truth? Billy the Kid was less a cold-blooded killer and more a young man burning inside, with the world in flames around him. And the more they tried to snuff him out, the stronger the fire grew. By 18, Billy was more than a name. He was an echo. Darn. The dusty taverns of Santa Fe, in the corridors of the Lincoln Barracks, in the whispers of gunpowder vendors and the nightmares of sheriffs, the name Billy the Kid walked ahead. He didn't need to be present to spark tension. His fame preceded him like the smell of gunpowder after a duel. In a West where men died over a wrong glance, he was the face of danger. But he was also the face of the poor, the wronged. And that's why, to some, he was a hero. In the Lincoln County War, while big names fought for power, Billy rode between both worlds. Too fast to die, too clever to be tamed. He sided with the weak, not out of ideology, but impulse. He felt more at ease with cowboys than lawyers. He'd rather share dried meat with Mexicans at ranches than smoke cigars with judges. The press hated him. They called him a monster. The elite hunted him. They said he was a cancer. But the peasants smiled when they heard his name, and that said a lot. I'm Billy, senor, but you don't need to fear me. That's how he introduced himself in humble homes. Many couldn't believe that. Soft-spoken young man with calm eyes was the same demon the newspapers described. Billy was charismatic. He had a gift of gab. He could play guitar, tell jokes, and dance like a boy at a church fair. But at the slightest whisper of a threat, his hand flew to the holster. And when it did, no one was faster. Some said he was protected by something mystical. Others claimed he practiced with his revolver in his sleep. But the truth was simpler, sadder. He practiced because it was the only place where he felt in control. The only time his life, so unsteady, depended solely on him. While most men sought jobs, Billy racked up escapes. While others built homes, they built their graves. And he did it all with a mocking grin. But time has no sense of humor. Fame turned into a curse. The bigger Billy's name grew, the more bounty hunters appeared. People wanting to make a name for themselves. With his head, sheriffs willing to turn a blind eye for a well-aimed bullet. And old friends who began to drift away, fearing they'd be dragged into the fire Billy carried wherever he went. He started sleeping with his revolver between his knees. He woke at the slightest noise, and he spoke less, much less. The paranoia wasn't baseless. He knew what was coming. Pat Garrett was already on his trail. Garrett was different from the others. He wasn't thirst for blood. He was cold, calculated, a former killer turned sheriff, the kind of man who doesn't chase, but waits, who doesn't announce himself, but watches. And he knew Billy, knew his habits, his roots, his hideouts. That's why, in his final months, Billy kept moving constantly. 2 days here, 3 there, never riding at the same time, only stopping to sleep when his body couldn't go on. And even then, he felt the weight of Garrett's gaze behind every hill. The kid died with a question on his lips. "¿Quién es?" he said in the dark, trying to make out a figure he already knew, deep down, was death disguised as a man. He had no chance to run, no time to react. His revolver wasn't even in its holster. In the end, there was no duel, no glory. Just a shot, a body, and a story that was only beginning. Fort Sumner woke to the smell of gunpowder and silence. Some residents said they heard the shot. Others only noticed Pat Garrett leaving Pete Maxwell's house. Eyes lowered, hat in hand, a strange weight on his face. Billy was dead, but it no longer mattered where his body lay. What mattered was where his story would go. And it wouldn't stop there. Garrett wrote an official report. He published a book. He tried to control the narrative, said he had no choice, that he was ambushed, that he acted in self-defense, but no one really believed him. The Old West was tired of excuses. Billy wasn't a saint, but he wasn't the demon they painted him to be either, and that made his death all the more powerful. Because what died there wasn't just a man, it was a symbol. Billy represented something the people recognized, not in words, but in their gut. He was the homeless boy, the directionless orphan, the man shaped by the violence he swore to fight. And maybe that's why his story never rested. Soon, the first rumors began. Billy didn't die. It was someone else's body. He escaped to Mexico. He was seen in Arizona. Garrett gained a reputation as a liar. Others started saying he'd killed the wrong man, that it was all a setup. Decades later, old cowboys swore they'd talked with him, drank with him, even played cards with him, as if Billy were more ghost than fact. And maybe he was. Because the legend of Billy the Kid grew faster than any truth. Hollywood turned him into a rebel hero. Songs were written, novels sold by the thousands. Kids played at being him in backyards, fingers shaped like pistols. And adults sighed, remembering a time when danger rode in on horseback, not disguised in a suit. The government, meanwhile, hesitated. They never knew what to do with his memory. Pardon him, celebrate him, erase him. In 2003, New Mexico's then-Governor Bill Richardson considered a posthumous pardon for Billy, a symbolic, belated, and controversial attempt at justice. In the end, he backed down. Perhaps because pardoning a myth is like trying to leash the wind. The question lingering in the air was never, who was Billy the Kid? But rather, why did we need him so much? The answer is harsher than it seems. Billy was the cracked mirror of a nation being born. In a lawless land where justice was a luxury and survival a curse, he represented chaos with a human face. He wasn't educated. He wasn't cruel. He was fast. He was clever. He was what many wanted to be but couldn't. And that forbidden aspiration is what turns men into legends. But behind the wanted poster was just a tired boy. Tired of running. Tired of being hated. Tired of carrying the weight of a life he didn't choose. Billy didn't plan to be famous. He never wanted to be an example. All he wanted, maybe, was peace. A cabin. A guitar. Someone who'd call him not the Kid, but just Henry. But the Old West didn't give that to anyone, and America always preferred martyrs to survivors. Today, his grave still stands in Fort Sumner, surrounded by bars, watched by signs, visited by the curious. Someone placed a cross there. Someone left dried flowers. Someone wrote on a folded piece of paper, "Rest, kid. You live longer than all of us." Maybe that's the true legacy. Billy the Kid didn't live long, but he lived fiercely. And despite everything against him, laws and guns, sheriffs and betrayals, loneliness and pain, he didn't vanish. Because in the end, what defines a man isn't what he owns, but what he leaves behind when he's gone. And Billy, with his stolen youth, with his restless eyes, with his spectacular escapes, left something even Garrett's bullet couldn't kill. A myth. That was the life of Billy the Kid. But the question still echoes. What if he'd just been born in another time?